Hello, I'm the 10-minute English teacher. Let's get you exam ready. Today we're doing a poetry walking talking mock for Kamikaze from the Power and Conflict cluster for AQA English Literature. All you need is a paper and a pen, and in 45 minutes I'm going to take you through a model response that you're going to write. Okay, here's the question. How is war presented in Kamikaze, and one other poem from the Power and Conflict cluster? So we're in the first 5 minutes now. We've got the poem, that's the named poem, and in the exam that will be in front of you. I'm not going to read that to you, and you probably can't see it in the screen. You shouldn't need to. By the time you're in the exam hall, you should have revised all 15 poems well enough to know them confidently. We're going to need a few quotes from that poem, but I'm not going to need to spend my time reading that poem now when it's something I should be familiar with. So I'm going to move on to thinking carefully about my response, and that's something that we're about to begin. Okay, paragraph 1. This is the best way to start your response. You're going to start with a paragraph that introduces your two poems that you've chosen to write about, the named one and then the one from your memory. And on this instance, we're using remains. What we're going to do is we're going to link both poems to the question. So the question is asking us about war. What we're going to need to do is make sure that we are just carefully telling the exam what the poem's about, how it relates to that theme, a little bit about the context, but very, very quickly. So explain what Kamikaze is about in 2 or 3 sentences, and in those sentences use the word war. Tell us how it relates to the theme in the question. And then once you've done that, in the same paragraph, explain what remains is about in 2 or 3 sentences and use the word war. You've got 5 minutes to do that. You're going to hear from me when that time is up. Okay, you've had 5 minutes. You should now have your introductory paragraph introducing the two poems. We're going to move on to paragraph 2. So we've introduced the poems that we've chosen. We've told the examiner how they relate to the theme that's been named in the question. Now my second paragraph is going to be about the structure in each of the poems. So we need to do 2 things in this paragraph. We've got about 5 minutes to do this. The first thing, you're going to comment on the structure of Kamikaze and explain why the writer has made their choices. And then you're going to comment on the structure of Remains and explain why the writer has made their choices. So both of them do not rhyme. They don't have rhyme schemes. Think about what that might be reflecting. The idea of like how life has been completely turned upside down by war and the experiences that the subject in Kamikaze has had and the speaker in Remains. So you've got 5 minutes now to write a paragraph that explores the structure in both. You're going to hear from me at the end to move you on. So begin writing now. Okay, so we've got our introductory paragraph, we've got paragraph exploring structure. Now it's time to start exploring the poems. Now, before we move on to paragraph 3, if you're aiming for a 4, a 5 or a 6, so far we've explored the themes and the structure, we've mentioned a little bit of context. You should get away with a few PEA paragraphs for each poem. Just make sure you analyse some quotes from both, because you'll limit your the marks you'll get if you only talk about one poem. You've got to explore both poems. So we've been comparative already. If we're exploring both poems, that's going to take us to 4, 5, 6. For a 7, 8, 9 for the top band, which is level 6 on the mark scheme, you now need to explore the similarities and differences in the ideas communicated in the poem and compare the way language is used by the writers. So here's an example of that sort of, in effect, spotting that remains is using alliteration in the poem to reflect the sounds of war, and exposure uses sibilants for the same effect. That would be an example of being exploratory and using key terminology to explore language. Today, we're thinking about Kamikaze and Remains. What we're going to do is try and aim for that 7, 8, 9 response. I'm going to give you some guidance and help you to achieve that today. So now we start analysing language and really exploring the poems. In paragraph 3, we're going to start with the point in the top left-hand corner. So explain that Kamikaze explores how soldiers have to make difficult decisions. In Kamikaze, the pilot has got to make the choice of going through with his mission or returning to his family. It's a really difficult decision that he has to make. So I want you to make that point, and then once you've done that, there's a quote for you to analyse, like a huge flag waved one way and then the other, which is about the fish that he's looking at from above. If you need any extra help with these key quotes, there are some videos from me that will help you, 10-minute videos that guide you through the poems. But for now, let's make sure that we've made that point and then we've analysed that bit of evidence. Once you've done that, in the same paragraph, you can explore that Remains is also about people having to make difficult decisions in war. So we've got this quote, possibly armed, probably not. What decision did the speaker have to make, and how is that quote used in the poem? You've got 5 minutes to do that now. You'll hear from me when that time is up. Okay, we're going to move on to paragraph 4 now. If you need some time to finish paragraph 3, feel free to pause. Otherwise, we'll move on. And here we are, paragraph 4. So this paragraph, you're going to start with this point, explain that both poems explore the pain of life after war. They're both about people who've returned from war and their lives afterwards. So make that point. And here's a bit of evidence about the person in Kamikaze's life after war. So we've got that quote: "He must have wondered what had been the better way to die, because his family disown him when he returns home." So analyse that and explore why that's put at the very end of the poem, the effect that that has. Once you've done that, you can explore that Remains also is exploring the life of soldiers after war. And we've got this quote: "His bloody life in my bloody hands," from the end of Remains. It's got that intertextual link to Lady Macbeth. It's hinting at those ideas, that metaphor there, to explore his guilt and his feelings. So we've got that point, that bit of evidence, and then we're going to link to the second poem to be comparative. You've got 5 minutes to do that now. Okay, paragraph 5. So before we start, let's think about what we should have so far. We've got a paragraph that introduces the poems we've chosen. We've got a paragraph that introduces the structure and explores that. And then so far we've had 2 paragraphs where we've analysed language in both texts. And we're going to do that for a final time now. So we've got another point to make here. Explain that kamikaze makes war seem painful and negative. In simple terms, kamikaze makes war seem terrible. That's your point. And we've got this quote, powerful incantations, which is about the way that he's been influenced to want to take his own life for his country. So explore that metaphor there and the ideas that are being communicated. Once we've done that analysis, we're going to move on to then remains and make a link. Explain that remains also makes war seem painful and negative. And we've got this really stark reference from that poem. One of my mates goes by and tosses his guts back into his body, which is the quote that you can then analyse. You've got 5 minutes to do that now. You'll hear from me when the time is up. Okay, so you've had time for paragraph 5. We're going to move on now to paragraph 6. This is the final paragraph, and we've got about 5 minutes left. So this is what we need to do. If you have time, don't waste it. You either have enough time to write another comparative paragraph or another PEA. There might just be one quote from one of those poems that you've got something really clever and insightful to say something about. So if that's the case, use that time there. And knowing what you can do in the time you have comes with practice, which is what you've been doing today. So use that time to either write a paragraph of your own or another PEA about one of those poems, and use this time also to check your work back. That's what needs to be done before you move on. So I'll leave you with a few moments before I talk to you about the mark scheme. You've got about 5 minutes just to think about your response very carefully now. And here's the mark scheme. Today we've been aiming for level 6, so we should have been critical and exploratory in our comparison of the two poems. We've explored structure, we've looked at language throughout the two poems, show a really confident understanding of them by being able to pick out those references. And that's what you need to be able to do for whatever poem is named in the exam. So make sure that you've revised them really carefully. Read them yourself and enjoy them, but also check out my other videos that take you through the poems on what to say about structure and key uses of language. Okay, check out the other videos on my channel. I'll continue to add content, and feel free to ask for something you'd like to see me cover in the content section. Don't forget to like and subscribe and ring the bell, and keep revising.